Paul Nolte is the Senior Vice President and Portfolio Manager at Kingsview Asset Management, standing by. Paul, I want to get into these numbers. First, I'm noticing treasuries are inching lower a bit, kind of sticking with the pattern that we've been seeing in the overnight session. What are you seeing in terms of reaction to?
Yeah, it's a mild reaction. The equities came off here a little bit. I think the big number was the spending number. Personal spending was up 0.6%, a little bit higher than expectations. And again, it points to what we've been seeing in some of the numbers, that the consumer actually in the U.S. is healthy. They are spending, maybe not at all the retailers. The retail numbers that were coming out the last 2 weeks were a little bit uneven. But in general, the consumer's pretty healthy. So again, I think what this does is it, for the very short term, puts a little bit of concern in the Fed being aggressive about cutting interest rates.
Yeah, you know, this muted reaction, I'm noticing it's a similar situation in the dollar, as is treasuries. Dollar, for the most part, well, holding that mid 98 range. Let's pull up the numbers, though, real quick so our viewers can see. Again, Paul, you mentioned that the 0.6% for the, again, for the consumer spending, but it looks like the personal income was a bit of a disappointment. It only came in up 0.1%. They were looking for 0.3. PCE price index at 0.2, in line with expectations, as was the case with the core PCE price index. Paul, what does all this mean for the dollar? I noticed the euro traded a new low this week.
Yeah, you know, the dollar has been the safe haven currency. Between the dollar and the yen, those are the two currencies that have held up extremely well through the month of August, with everything else falling off the table. So if you're looking for, again, safe haven, you know, those are the two currencies that you can hang out in. The dollar appreciation has been, you know, maybe a step and a half forward, one step backwards. Been a very slow, steady appreciation over the course of the year. The yen has been a little bit more aggressive in their appreciation, but it comes at the expense of everything else. You look at the euro, you look at the British pound, you look at the Australian currency, you look at the yuan. All of them have been doing relatively poorly versus those two currencies. Yeah,
you know, Paul, we've got the euro currency on the screen here right now. Our viewers can see the new lows that we just posted. It's interesting because the dollar has yet to hit a new high. You mentioned multiple currencies that were coming under pressure, Paul. The one that you didn't mention was the New Zealand dollar. New lows again this week as well. I'm wondering, I was a little surprised. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I figured we'd see a little bit of a lift in the 6N, especially with the U.S.-China trade talks, the rhetoric being dialed back a little bit this week, but seems like they continue to struggle.
No, they have, and they've been struggling for a while. Part of the reason why they actually had a surprise cut in rates earlier in August, and I think there's some concern there that things are not going as well as quickly. You know, they are a huge export market around that area. So to Australia, to China, to Japan. And certainly the weakness that we're seeing in the Japanese economy is having an impact on New Zealand as well. So again, you know, you really, if you're looking at the volatility in the markets and where are you going to hedge, it's going to be in the U.S. dollar, and it's going to be in the Japanese yen.
Paul, let's talk a little bit about the yen. Again, one of the things I'm watching is the flight to quality type activity we saw with the indices coming off. The yen was rallying. The indices are starting to rally back. You mentioned the yen starting to come off a little bit. I'm wondering if that could be the next catalyst to get the little engine that could, well, if it can, that's the U.S. dollar potentially into a new high.
You know, it is, and it's one of the things that we were actually kind of surprised about during the month of August, with all the volatility, with all the issues around trade, with the global slowing. The U.S. has actually held up and has continued to hold up well. It's one of the things that you and I have talked about over really the course of the last year. Where are you going to go for growth? And it has been very much the U.S. The U.S. continues to be kind of the island, which has been a surprise because, again, we're all interconnected globally, but the U.S. continues to do relatively well. And I think part of the reason for it is a very diverse base that the U.S. has as far as companies, both from a global perspective as well as domestic. So we've got a very broad base here in the United States. And I think that's really what is helping us out over the course of this last year or so.
An interesting take. I like that one. Paul, let's talk a little bit about some of the activity we've seen this week in the British pound. It sounds like Boris Johnson has managed to kind of limit Parliament's ability to, well, get in front of his, approach towards the negotiation process, but it also sounds like he's going to face some legal struggles in terms of that as well.
Yeah, he is. He's trying a completely different approach than what Theresa May did, and obviously, given the fact that she failed, he's trying something completely different in order to try to make something happen.
Yeah.
This has been going on for a lot longer than we thought.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. We've made it into the courts, but it sounds like they're, looking more for a drop-dead date, one way or the other, coming up here in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Paul, final question. I'll let you get out of here. With the big week that we've had, the big month that we had, oftentimes we lose sight of what's coming our way. A big week ahead of us, though, in terms of numbers. ISM, I noticed the employment data. We got Bank of Canada. It looks like RBA also as well. Talk to us about what you're dialed in on and what we should be keeping an eye on next week.
Yeah, it'll be manufacturing. It'll be the employment data. Manufacturing, if you look at the regional feds, their manufacturing indexes all turned lower, so we would expect manufacturing to continue to be below 50. Unemployment, we got a whiff that they're going to revise downward early next year, 500,000 in jobs. So again, the jobs report's going to be important for us to keep an eye on. Wage growth key, given the numbers that we saw here this morning. Those are going to be, I think, the big market movers, and are going to be, I think, what people look at for the Fed as well to determine what they're going to do in September.
All right, Paul, really appreciate you joining us here this morning. It gives us something to watch for and something to keep an eye on as we head into the end of the week and into next week. A lot of activity throughout the month, and Paul, a great breakdown on some of the recent price activity in the indices. Now, I want to shift attention. That's Paul Nolte. He's joining us from Kingsview Asset Management.